Hi, I'm Rex Moncrief with Smarter Geek, and I thought it might be interesting to show you the process of some of the things that I do concerning websites and graphics and audio files and even video. So I have a client who's a professional fisherman, and he just recently changed one of his sponsors over to Bass Cat Boats. So we need to find the Bass Cat logo, then we've got to get that set up in Photoshop where we can use it easier in the future for different projects that we may have to do for Jim. Then we're going to put that in the intro video that we've already created, so we're going to replace his existing sponsor. And then we need to change the audio in the intro as well. So let me show you how we do that. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to go in and we're going to search for the logo. So I'm going to use Google and I'm going to search for Bass Cat logo. And I'm just going to click on images to make it do an image search. Now, obviously we've got several of these to choose from. So let's take a look at a couple of them. So if I click on this one here, this one looks pretty good, but the problem is that we may not want to use this bubble text in everything that we're doing. We actually want a little bit cleaner logo than that. So let's move on to the next one. And this one's looking pretty good too. And if we look at the pixel size, it's 1500 by 659. But the red's a little bit dark in that one. And so I'm going to take a look at this one. Now this one looks good, but it's only 148 pixels, so I'm going to be starting out really too small for what we need. We want as high a resolution as possible. And so I'm actually going to choose this one with the darker background. And it's a 1500 by 659, so I'm starting out at pretty good resolution. So what I'll do is I will go ahead and save that one first, and then we're going to open it up and use a combination of Photoshop and Illustrator to get this image like we want. So the first thing I'm going to do is let me click on View Image, and this brings up just the image in our browser. And notice that it's a JPEG. That means it's a raster image. Now it looks pretty good right here, but our potential problem is as we zoom in, you can begin to see the pixelations around the edges of the logo. That's because it's a raster image. This is not a vector. All right. And so you can start to see where as we zoom in, it fades out. Now again, for most of our uses, that's not really a big deal, but I want to be able to take this, convert it to a vector so that we can scale it pretty much to any resolution that we need without any real clarity loss. Now the problem is that we've got to get this vector image because we need to get this stuff produced pretty quickly. I'm sure we could contact Bass Cat and get their marketing department to send us one, but in this case I'm just going to create my own in the sake of time. And I don't think the Bass Cat's really going to have a problem with this because they're sponsoring Jim, and so they want to be able to get their name out there and have everything look good as well, so I really don't think that they'll have a problem. So I'm going to take this logo and let's go on into Photoshop and see what we can do with it. Alright, so I've taken the logo into Photoshop and I've gone in and removed the black background, and it also had a white border around it. And I've also removed that white border. Now it looks pretty jagged here and not all that great. And I also removed the tagline at the bottom. We're going to deal with that here in a minute. So now that we have it in Photoshop here, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I save my PSD, which I've already done that in the interest of time for this video. And we're going to open that up in Illustrator. And then we're going to have Illustrator actually convert that into a vector. Once we have it as a vector, we can scale it like we want, including bringing it back to Photoshop and doing whatever we need to with the image. So let's take a look in Illustrator and I'll show you kind of what we did there. Alright, so if we flip back over to Illustrator, and let's open up the logo in Illustrator. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to open up the PSD here. So I'm going to open up the actual Photoshop file. And so what I did was just a simple image trace with this logo. So I'm going to select the logo and I'm going to do image trace. And now Illustrator has literally traced around this and created as a vector so that I can zoom in. Notice how far I'm zooming in and notice how clean these lines are now. So now I've got something that's a whole lot easier to work with. So after I convert this over to a After I convert this over to a vector, then I can save that vector image so that I can always come back to this. But I can also work with it real easy in Photoshop now. And so let's go ahead and bring that up. And now you can see that after I've cleaned that logo up and brought it into Photoshop, I'm able to go in and do things like add a white stroke around it. So I'm going to turn this off and show you, and turn it back on. I can very easily add a drop shadow. I've actually rasterized this in Photoshop, but I could go in and we could change colors if we wanted. So let's turn it into a blue here. We'll just do something real quick. So we could sit here and turn this into blue very quickly. And so now, again, I'm able to deal with this however I need to, including modifying the image size. Right now I've got it at 2500 pixels wide by 600 pixels high, which is oversized for what I need for the website or the video. But again, I can do what I need to now that I have this, number one, vectorized with Illustrator, and number two, set up in Photoshop to easily change colors depending on Jim's boat color or whatever color may look best on the video or the website that we're doing. Alright, so once I have this logo created, let me step my way back to where I was. Alright, so once I have the logo set up here in Photoshop like I want, I need to change it on his what we call his sponsor block. So I'll show you what that is. If we go over here to Jim's website, and if we take a look over on the left-hand side here, I've got a little sponsor block, and this is where we're just listing his sponsors and their logos. And you can see that I already have the Bass Cat in there. So what I need to do is get the Bass Cat logo on that sponsor block, and I'll show you how I did that real quick. Whoops, let's flip back over here to Photoshop, and let me open up the sponsor block, and you can see it right here. So each layer in this represents one of the logos. If you look over here on the right side, represents one of the logos for each of the sponsors. And now that I have that Photoshop file ready for Bass Cat, there's a couple of ways I can get it in there. One, I can just right-click, duplicate layer, and we can send it over to the sponsor block. We'll ignore our change there, and now it's actually in the sponsor block. It's oversized for this particular sponsor block, but I can easily resize that down. And we can drag it to where we want. Now, just to show you what's going on here, I'm going to take this. Once I bring it in here, I just need to deal with the border for a second there, or the stroke rather. Alright, so let me hide this one that I've already done. If you notice, the white stroke around it is entirely too thick, but that's okay. I can go in here and we can crank that down and make it look nice and neat. And looks like our drop shadow is a little too much now that we've scaled it down. So we can change the distance on that. Or we could actually just turn the drop shadow off and let it look a little flat like the rest of them. And I'm going to actually resize this down just a hair. And presto, now we have it in our sponsor block, and we're ready to export that sponsor block out and then upload it to the website. Now the way we do that is we go to File, Save for Web. I'm going to save it as a PNG file, as a PNG. My width and height here is about correct for what I need. I'm going to save this out in a little, what I call my temporary folder. Alright, and of course I've already done that, so I'm going to cancel out of this. Now we go over to his website, and we're going to go into the back end of the website. And I've actually got that sponsor block in a widget, so the first thing I need to do is I need to upload that. So I would go to Media, and of course we're using WordPress here, so I would go to Media, and we want to add new, and we could drop the file in here, of course select it out of here. There's our sponsor block. I've already done this, so I'm not going to re-upload it. Once we upload this, then what I need to do is just get the URL to that image. So I click on the image, go to File, URL. I'm going to copy that to my clipboard. Now I can go back over here to Appearance, go to Widgets, and I've got a little text widget in the sidebar, and I simply paste the URL to his sponsor block and save it. And once I do that, presto, it shows up just like a charm. So that's how we get Basscat onto a sponsor block. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we need to change the logo in the intro to his video, or add the Basscat logo, replace his existing sponsor, and then we got to change the audio file. So stick with me for a few minutes and I'll show you how to do that.